The old man's expression suddenly twisted, his face contorted with fury. He argued it was Liu Shang who crushed the hope of their lord, and for that Liu Shang must pay with his life. By the third day, Dong Po Chan was on a roll, taking down yet another beast. By now, he'd gotten used to the intense environment and the pressure around him. Even the fearsome level 8 beasts couldn't withstand a single strike from him. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, the marshals were utterly shocked. It had only been 3 days, yet Dong Po Chan's merit points had already reached a jaw-dropping 1.58 million. They couldn't even begin to imagine how many beasts he'd killed so far. While the other 3 representatives combined didn't even come close to his score, one top general remarked that Dong Po Chan's strength was probably on par with his own now. Not to mention the other 3 were still battling at the 1,000-meter mark. While he was already 3,000 meters deep, some even began comparing the representative, saying the difference between Dong Po Tian and the rest was like a kitchen knife versus a great sword. And this wasn't even the craziest part. Dong Po Tian was still under 50 years old, making him shockingly young for someone of his caliber. That being said, everyone in the room couldn't help but notice something odd, because nobody seemed to know where Liu Shang was. All they could see was that his merit points hadn't changed at all. Whispers started spreading across the room. Was Liu Shang avoiding the competition on purpose? Curious eyes turned toward the Eastern Marshal, but he stayed calm. All he really cared about was to figure out what Liu Shang was up to. The scene shifted back to Dong Po Tian. By now, taking down level 8 beasts was as easy as breathing for him. After finishing them off, he would carefully gather their bodies. Over the past 3 days, he'd lost count of how many beasts he'd killed, but he was sure his merit points were in the millions. However, he couldn't dive deeper into the ocean. Anything beyond 3,000 meters would cause the communication devices and cameras to malfunction. And this was pretty much his limit as well. So he decided it was time to head back. As he slowly swam upward, he could already picture the future, solidify his position as the #1 general star in the entire military, ready to step into the ranks of the top generals. I wonder how he'd feel if he knew our boy is already a top general. Just as he was basking in this thought, a strange noise came from below. Instinctively, he turned around and looked below him. What he sensed made his heart skip a beat. He could almost feel the powerful blood energy coming from it. Could it be human? No way, he thought. That was impossible, or at least it should be impossible. Whatever it was, this overwhelming presence sent chills down his spine. This kind of power felt like nothing less than a 9th-level martial saint. But who or what could possibly surpass him by so many levels in sheer blood energy alone? But again, who would even stay in the pitch-black depths of this endless ocean? He took a deep breath, convinced there had to be some terrifying beast lurking down there. Deciding not to stick around to find out, he turned back and headed for the surface. When he surfaced, the other 3 also began to appear one by one. The girl chuckled, noticing that their hauls of trophies were pretty similar to hers. She thought to herself that this grand military competition wasn't anything special after all. But then they saw Dong Po Chan's loot. Their jaws practically hit the ocean floor. In the conference room, the merit points had already been tallied. Dong Po Chan racked up a staggering 7.5 million points, while the other 3 only had 300,000, 160,000, and 200,000 respectively. When the girl heard this, she could hardly believe it. The combined scores of all 3 of them didn't even come close to being a fraction of Dong Po Chan's total. The trio had no choice but to accept the massive gap between them and him. It seemed their only role in this competition was to highlight just how ridiculously strong Dong Po Chan was. And yet, Liu Shang's merit points still sat stubbornly at 0. Had he left? But that couldn't be right since no one had seen him leave. A few marshals were starting to look disappointed, some even questioning whether Liu Shang was as powerful as everyone claimed. Maybe he hadn't managed to defeat a single beast. But the Eastern marshal stayed calm, knowing full well what Liu Shang was capable of. He wasn't worried about embarrassment. He just wanted to know where Liu Shang had gone. The scene shifted to the deepest part of the ocean. It was a place so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Liu Shang stood there, silently clenching his fist, then slammed it into the rocky wall beside him. Over the last 3 days, his body had been pushed to the limits, much like it had been during his gravity chamber training. The pressure of the deep sea, combined with his water breathing, had made his attacks even more powerful. Around him lay the massive corpses of countless beasts. But Liu Shang wasn't focused on them. He had something more important to test, which is experimenting with moving his immortal cells to other parts of his body. Starting with his arm, he extended one hand forward and clenched it tightly. It was so powerful he could grip anything into the void. A faint smile appeared as he nodded in satisfaction. Then came his leg. With a single stomp, the seabed collapsed. The force rippled upward, breaking through layers of the ocean. At first, the change on the surface was subtle. Just small disturbances in the water. No one noticed except Dong Po Tian. The next moment, towering water pillars erupted from the ocean, forming a massive vortex near the warship. Dong Po Tian's eyes widened as he realized this was the same energy he felt from the deep sea just moments ago. The water pillars spiraled wildly. Within the vortex, Liu Shang appeared, and with just one stomp, he effortlessly got back to the surface. Dong Po Tian gulped hard, staring at Liu Shang in disbelief. Could it be him? Meanwhile, Liu Shang looked pleased with himself, testing his ability to merge the immortal cells with his stellar body technique, channeling the energy throughout his entire body. With just one casual punch, he estimated that he could now unleash a strike equivalent to 100 stars. With one stomp, he could shatter the depths of the ocean. As the beast corpses began floating up to the surface, Liu Shang paused to reflect. Before surfacing, he had taken a quick detour into the dream realm to check on the future. As expected, the future shifted once again. This time it seemed that he managed to slip away with nothing more than minor injuries. Yet even so, this clearly wasn't the future he had hoped for. Dong Potion had captured a lot of monsters, but our Liu Shang had captured a very large number of monsters. This was nothing in front of him. Our Liu Shang has a golden aura emanating from his body, and our hero says, "Are you Dong Potion?" Seeing so much of golden energy coming out of Liu Shang's body, Dong Potion gets a little scared and asks, "Who is this?" Dong Potion gets jealous and says that there is no one more powerful than me. I am the most powerful general here. Dong Potion immediately punches his hand where purple energy was coming out and charges forward. But Liu Shang blocks him easily and his punches have a deadly impact. But Dong Potion is nothing in front of Liu Shang. After stopping the attack, Liu Shang attacked Dong Potion with a strong blow. This blow was so powerful that Dong Potion flew very far away. Dong Potion is beaten so badly that he is hit by a huge stone and even his clothes are torn and he is in very bad condition. All the people there who have seen him fight and are very excited shout that the Eastern general was defeated in a single attack. Liu Shang was very surprised and started thinking, "Brother-in-law, you are very weak. I just applied a little pressure." He puts his hand on his head and thinks, "Forget it. I've already fought. The worst that can happen is that I can just be polite to him next time we meet." At the same time, in the command room, the man with the scar on his face was standing with his mouth open and his eyes full of fear. Dong Potion was the number 1 in the central district. He couldn't believe that there was such a gap between Lewin and Dong Potion. The northern marshal sitting next to him was also standing with his mouth open and his eyes full of surprise seeing that Dong Po was defeated as if he was trash. The marshal of the central district began to inspect the screen, and despite being in shock, he tried to remain calm. The combat prowess that Luong had displayed had already reached a level that even he had to admire, feeling that he was worthy of becoming a marshal despite his young age. His body was surrounded by intense golden flames. With a confident gaze, he revealed that today he intended to shatter the divine altar and wage war against the heavens. To do this, I must develop a peerless aura of invincibility. A giant screen appears above the ship and RMC is seen in it. Later, he decided to ask everyone for help so that they could provide some assistance. Everyone's attention was on RMC, and they all started watching him silently. The people on the ship did not understand what Liu Shang had just said, and they were very surprised and started looking at him. Hearing Liu Shang's words, the Eastern Marshal became extremely nervous and began to sweat. He observed Liu Shang and said, "Smashing the divine altar? Waging war against heaven? Liu Shang, what do you intend to do?" At that moment, Liu Shang gained momentum and landed on the water, creating a great golden burst. Liu Shang's eyes were full of confidence, and with a determined smile, he revealed, "Since you all are already here, there is no need to hide. I have already sensed your presence long ago." Just then, some lightning-like clouds began to form in front of the ships, and the East Marshal was astonished and speechless as a dense military aura could be felt from the clouds. In the blink of an eye, he jumps off the ship very quickly and starts moving towards it to satisfy his curiosity. He came a little closer, his eyes filled with surprise and fear. He couldn't believe it. They came from the clouds. The marshal's subordinates stepped forward. The oldest man with his hand on his cane remained calm, while on the other side the blonde-haired man, the black-haired woman, and the blue-haired man sitting in front of them were looking at the marshal intently. They were the 4 extreme symbols in the 28 mansions. A large number of martial artists appeared behind them, and seeing this, marshal couldn't help himself and was shocked with eyes full of fear. He told Master Chuan that the army was conducting military exercises today and asked what the Extreme Martial Arts Academy was doing here. Purple lightning emanated from Shan's body and his gaze focused on the marshal, showing that he had come to take Liu Shang's head following the highest martial saint's orders. Shan's energy was capable of taking down even the most powerful. The other marshals followed him and all clenched their fists and prepared to fight. Golden flames were emitting from his body, and he had a fierce expression on his face. Xuan opened his mouth and explained in a serious voice that he was wrong, pointed his finger at Luong and explained with angry eyes that if he had killed the 2 ruffians of the Martial Academy, he would have forgiven them. But Martial Saint's wife and her future descendants committed a cruel and unpardonable crime. Hearing this, all the military marshals present there were shocked and surprised. No one could believe that it was our boy who killed Lion Su. The East Marshal turned his head back and focused his attention on her, realizing he had made quite a mess this time. Our hero puts his hands in his pockets and stares blankly at the ground, questioning his actions. He closed his eyes and a smile spread across his face. No wonder why he was so angry, since it turned out that Lion Su had the blood of a martial saint in her body. If he had known beforehand that she was pregnant, he would have killed her without hesitation, because after all, he was no saint and revenge was necessary. He opened his eyes and looked at them carefully with a happy look, and a proud smile appeared on his face, which showed that he did not regret his action at all. Shi Hongfei nervously pointed his finger at Xuan and the others and tried to save time by asking what evidence Xuan had to prove that Luong was the killer. He said that the military department would discuss the matter with Vuong himself, and until the situation was clear, no one could touch a single hair of Luong. The others watched in silence. Marshall's expression changed. He couldn't help but be confused and wondered what was going on with an incredulous expression. Xuan and all his companions kneel down to honor and welcome their lord. Suddenly, there is a lot of lightning in the sky. A huge purple portal opens above our hero's head, and someone begins to come out of it. Lu Sheng begins to look at everything upward without changing his composure. Then we are shown a dangerous person who is a martial saint, but I have forgotten his name, so I will call him a human and martial saint, and because he is very powerful. His body is emitting a lot of powerful energy, and he is very angry. Because the display on the top of the ship shows a photo of the same person in front of whom everyone bows down with utmost respect and welcomes him. Even before the first years of martial arts techniques were developed and firearms existed, masters with advanced skills in ancient martial arts could break huge rocks with their bare hands and walk on walls, but even the strongest men couldn't withstand a small bullet. Even before martial arts techniques were developed and firearms came into existence, masters with advanced skills in ancient martial arts could break huge rocks and walk on walls with their bare hands, but even the strongest men could not withstand a small bullet. Humanity respected the power of science, and technology helped achieve many incredible feats. Humans could fly in the sky and dive into the depths of the earth. In those days, power was measured by knowledge, and science was above everything else. However, one day then, cracks began to appear in the sky and earth. Terrifying beasts descended upon the world, and the proud technologies of humanity could not even stop the weakest of these monsters. The limits of human flesh were shattered, and the trajectory of civilization veered off course. Fists entered the halls of power. Fists are now authority. Then a powerful warrior began to come into the world. Martial experts, relying on their strength, could defend a city, a state, a region, or even an entire country. They transformed the place that once belonged to the gods, giving people's reverence and faith a concrete and tangible goal. Among them, the strongest would break all boundaries, challenging the heavens and becoming living legends, a new era's gods on earth, known as the martial saints. He walked up to the marshals. All of them placed their fists above the clouds and bowed their heads in front of him as a sign of respect. The martial saint of Jai Dao looked at them quietly. The East Marshal's eyes were filled with anger. He couldn't help but clench his teeth tightly and get angry, without knowing why the Supreme Martial Saint had come. This is the exact reason why the army is doing whatever it takes to cultivate a level 9 Martial Saint. Without any real top powerhouse protecting us, once someone takes off the mask and turns the tables, all the so-called 3,000-year grandmasters, generals, and marshals will be nothing but a joke. The extreme martial saint of Jai Dao released a murderous aura. He had come because they said they wanted to discuss the matter with him, which showed that what he said was evidence. He looks at Lu Sheng with extreme anger and tells Lu Sheng that if I want you to die now, then you should die. Our boy looks up, and there the martial saint of Jai Dao is releasing a lot of power and asking Lu Sheng, "Do you have any objection?" Lu Sheng began observing him silently for several seconds. Our hero looks down and thinks deeply, what should I do? Friends, the video ends here. To see what is going to happen in the next video, you guys must subscribe to the channel. So guys, Daily Manhwas gave me a fake copyright strike, so fuck you Daily Manhwa. Friends, today I am going to explain the logging 10,000 years into the future. All eyes from Jai Dao were on him. The old man walked slowly forward. Since his master had just forced the army to bow its head, it was only fair for him to assert his authority as well. The group then began walking toward Lu Sheng. The blue-haired man stared at him, standing completely still, and remarked that they might have overestimated him. Watching Lu Sheng's trembling body, the group couldn't help but chuckle. The man said Lu Sheng was so scared he'd lost his mind. Killing him now wouldn't even take more than a second. A woman chimed in, saying with their lord present, even the entire military would bow, and even the marshal would lower their head. It was no surprise Lu Sheng was shaking like this. By now, the group was only a few steps away from Lu Sheng. The old man called out his name again, but Lu Sheng just clenched his fists tightly. The blue-haired man raised an eyebrow, curious if Lu Sheng was still thinking about fighting back. With a casual wave of his hand, He conjured a weapon from his powerful aura, only to be told by the old man telling him to finish it quickly. No need to tarnish their dignity by dragging it out. The blue-haired man smirked, confidently saying even if Lu Sheng wasn't terrified, it wouldn't take him more than 3 seconds to finish this. With that, he charged at Lu Sheng, descending from the sky with his weapon aimed to strike. But then, he heard something, catching him off guard. The voice tells him that the trembling wasn't out of fear. Before he could even process what was happening, he thought he saw Lu Sheng smiling. The voice continued, saying it wasn't fear but excitement that was making him tremble. Before he could react, Lu Sheng casually swung his fist. And in an instant, half the man's body was completely blown off. His expression froze in disbelief. He didn't even know what hit him. All he could hear was someone calling his name. His weapon slipped from his hand as he began falling into the sea. The old man was shocked and started to say something. But before he could finish, a streak of golden light zipped through the crowd. It passed the 3 of them in a flash and headed straight into the rest of the group. When Lu Sheng reappeared, he was already behind them. One of them managed to glance back just before his head slipped off his neck, wondering when did he even, the other 2 weren't so lucky. Their heads had been twisted completely backward before they could think. The old man muttered to himself, realizing too late that he was already dead. And in the next second, all their heads flew into the air. The last thing they all thought before darkness consumed them was the same. Lu Sheng, he's terrifying. Their remains fell into the sea, their blood painting the surface red, as droplets continued to fall from Lu Sheng's hands. He knew for a fact that if Zhao Jai himself had stepped in, it would have been almost impossible to kill anyone else. That's why he went all out and finished everything even before the martial saint could react. Right now, Lu Sheng was cooking. He was in his martial god form, activated immortal body, nature's breathing technique, and his perfect martial path is in full swing. And let's not forget all 22 of the immortal cells. The Eastern marshal stood frozen, staring at Lu Sheng in shock. He couldn't help but think, was this overwhelming killing intent the true extent of Lu Sheng's power? In mere moments, he had managed to kill so many top-tier great grandmasters. The other marshals, standing in stunned silence, gazed at the blood-streaked sea below. Among the carnage, only one person was alive. The blue-haired man, now missing half his body, trembling and forgetting his pain and sheer terror. He stretched a desperate hand toward the martial saint, pleading him to save him. The central marshal couldn't believe what he was witnessing. While great grandmasters typically possessed life forces far beyond ordinary humans, and sometimes, even with their heads chopped off, they could still remain alive. But the murderous energy pouring from Lu Sheng's attacks had completely obliterated their chance of survival. The blue-haired man continued to cry out for help, but Zhao Jai seemed momentarily stunned by the sheer scope of the massacre. Suddenly, he dashed towards the sea below. The blue-haired man crawled toward Zhao Jai, hope flickering in his eyes as he neared his lord. Just when he thought hope was within reach, a hand fell on his head from above. It was Lu Sheng. The man's lips trembled, barely managing to utter, "My lord." But before he could finish, blood sprayed across Zhao Jai's face as Lu Sheng smiled at him, Lu Sheng the mocked Zhao Jai. Telling him all of his dogs are dead, he said this out loud. Loud enough for everyone to hear. A collective shiver ran through everyone as they gulped nervously, all thinking the same thing. Lu Sheng is an absolute maniac. As his life force began fading, the blue-haired man couldn't understand why he had died. Even with his lord right in front of him, had he met this fate, why couldn't the martial saint save him? Lu Sheng tossed the head aside as though it were trash and locked his eyes on Zhao Jai. The martial saint, wiping the blood off his face, muttered coldly, "Good, very good." In the next moment, an overwhelming aura surged from him. "It's been 100 years since someone made me this angry. he said, as he slowly took a few steps forward. Behind him a pair of massive golden hands materialized. With each step, the golden figure took on a more complete form, and this was Zhao Jai's martial avatar. Zhao Jai took another step and spatially tells our boy he's done well, very well. Liu Sheng responded with nothing but a light chuckle. Then, with a smirk, pointing his middle finger forward, he says, "Fuck you. If you have guts, then try to stop him." Seeing his comrade die before his eyes, Marshal Saint could not suppress his anger, and he got ready to fight RMC to punish him for his insolence. The Marshal Saint, filled with anger, shows anger on his face for a few seconds, but then he stands up calmly again and starts looking at RMC. RMC also starts staring at him. And in the meantime, the Marshal Saint raises his hand and uses his blue sea sky ability on RMC. When he did this, there was no expression on his face, but when he raised his hand, a shining golden light first shone from around his body, and then after some time, water started flowing out from inside the sea and started rotating in front of his hands. It was as if a tornado of water was forming there. Seeing the Marshal Saint doing this, RMC gets very scared, and there is a surprised expression on his face, and a slight sweat of fear is also appearing on his face. He had come to know what it is. And by this time, the golden light made of water is moving around the Marshal Saint like a tornado. After creating his attack, the Marshal Saint Calumny tells RMC that this level of power should be enough to kill you very easily. And when Liu Sheng hears this from the Marshal Saint, he simply grits his teeth in anger, because even he found this attack to be very powerful. The impact of this powerful attack can be felt by other people in the military, and the pressure was so much that some people even closed their eyes because of it. And when they see RMC still in front of this attack, some of them say that this power is very powerful. Then they tell RMC to run away from here and say that do not fight against Supreme Marshal Saint. He is more powerful than you. And here Marshal Saint is now fully ready to attack, and he combines the tornado that was forming behind him with his punch and gets ready to attack RMC and says that you have no place to run from here. And saying this, he throws that powerful punch towards RMC. When this powerful punch is coming to hit RMC, it looks like a golden dragon that has the power to destroy anything that comes in its path. Seeing the power of this powerful attack, RMC gets an idea that Zhao Jai is actually capable of gathering all types of cosmic energy floating between heaven and earth into his palm. So the power of his palm must have now reached extremely terrifying heights. The attack of this punch is coming from right in front of RMC, yet he is unable to move away from it. It was as if this punch has made it difficult for him to move. At this point, RMC was unable to determine how many stars the Marshal Saint has, as determining the strength of a Marshal Saint seemed to be completely impossible. This is the real power of a living Marshal Saint, which is affecting other people present there, and to save ourselves from this attack, RMC will have to use his own power as well. For this, he activates the Marshal Saint's skill by combining Divine Whale Dharma, Unparalleled State, Dharma of Killing, Warrior status altogether, and as soon as he activates it, he also attacks the Marshal Saint's incoming attack with a punch. As soon as both the attacks collide with each other, a huge explosion takes place, and it also created a void there. However, RMC is still struggling to destroy the attack. He was not able to resist it completely, and after some time, when the dust clears, he is seen injured. One of his hands has been completely destroyed. Due to being injured, he was falling down from the air, and along with his hands, his legs were also damaged. It seems that his whole body is completely injured. His hand is completely destroyed. When other people see this, they get very shocked and start shouting the name of RMC. Some people are completely shocked to see that this is the same Liu Sheng who had defeated the Eastern Emperor's general very easily. And now how did he die so easily at the hands of the Supreme Marshal Saint? Those who were on lower posts had understood that whoever is below the saint are all ants, and here RMC falls straight into the sea after getting injured, and he seemed unconscious at this time. And on the other hand, thinking that RMC is dead, Marshal Saint lands on the ground, and looking at the water says that everything is over, and on the other hand, all the military generals get very angry seeing this. However, they cannot express their anger in front of Marshal Saint, so they all just keep saying to each other that everything is over. The military's 100 years of hope, everything is over. Hong Fei, she also stands with them, and without wasting much time jumps into the sea, saying that Liu Sheng cannot die so easily. I will go inside the water and find him even if I have to find his dead body. Seeing him doing this, someone else says that the attack which Marshal Saint has just done contained the mighty power of heaven and earth. Unless he has a body equal to that of a Marshal Saint, he will be destroyed into ashes. As other people present, they were thinking, the same thought was in the mind of Marshal Saint also. He starts leaving from here thinking that everything is over, so now he does not need to stay here. However, as soon as he turns back and starts leaving from here, he feels something behind him, and when he looks back, a wave of the sea has risen behind him. Seeing that huge wave of water, Marshal Saint says that I am very surprised that you are still alive, and seeing Armik doing this, Marshal Saint raises his hand, and with just the impact of his hand, he breaks this skill of RMC. And when that wave of water scatters here and there, Armik is seen inside it, whose one hand is still cut, and seeing him, a slight smile comes on Marshal Saint's face. Other people also become very happy to see that Liu Sheng is still alive, and as soon as they see him, they immediately gather around him and get ready to save him. They were all thinking of getting Armik out of here quickly. Even if they had to risk their lives in front of the Marshal Saint, they could at least fight the Marshal Saint for some breath. Hong Fei also tells Armik that you are the only one who cannot die here. You are the only hope of the military. While Hong Fei was saying his point, RMC's hand falls on his shoulder, and seeing the determination of all of them, he tells them that there is no need for this, and as soon as he says his point, he immediately regenerates his hand again using his healing ability. As soon as other people see Armik fully recovered, a smile comes on their faces. Some of them ask about RMC's health, and some say how flexible his body is. Marshal Saint is also impressed by this, because he too had not seen an interesting person like Armik for a long time. So he makes a proposal to RMC, where he asks Armik to accept him as his teacher, and in return he will protect Armik for 100 years and promote him to Marshal Saint, and Armik killed his 4 powerful men who was known as 4 Elephant. And he also withstood one of the moves of Marshal Saint, so it proves that Liu Sheng is very extraordinary. This proposal of Marshal Saint shocks everyone that Marshal Saint himself is recruiting Liu Sheng. Seeing Armik standing very quietly, Hong Fei thinks in his mind that what are you waiting for? Promise him right now, Liu Sheng. Zhao Jai will forgive you right now, so bowing your head for now is not a bad idea. All the people standing there were thinking that this proposal is very good for RMC, but on hearing this proposal Armik laughs, and then says that you want to recruit me with this little power of yours. Is this your 9th level full-strength saintly method power? As soon as other people hear this, their mouths are left open that instead of refusing, he has refused by insulting him. After this, Liu Sheng also raises his hand and starts activating a shining golden light, saying let me show you what the real power is, and when he does this, a tornado made of golden shine light just like Marshal Saint's is created there, seeing which Marshal Saint's eyes remain wide open. When Armik was creating the power of heaven and earth, his power was a little more powerful than the power of Marshal Saint. Even though Armik was not able to resist the power of heaven and earth of Marshal Saint, that move was weak enough to kill RMC, and the move that Liu Sheng is using right now was exactly like the move of Marshal Saint. Maybe Armik has copied it. Marshal Saint is very surprised to see army capturing the power of heaven and earth. He could not understand how he is able to use this power. This seemed absolutely impossible to him because Armek is still at level 8 and he cannot borrow the power of heaven and earth at this time. Seeing Marshal Saint getting so scared, Armek smiles and says, "This thing is surprising you a lot that you could not kill me even with your killing move. That is why you are not able to understand anything. But if you want to know about it, then I will answer it mercifully. Strength always bows before strong force. I call it a power that can make even bricks fly." Liu Shang very quickly creates a tornado over the sea that is even bigger than Zhao Jai Marshal Saint. The next moment all the energy got compressed into a point, and with a smile Liu Shang told her to control herself. Things were about to get intense. This is the first time that the Marshal Saint starts observing Liu Shang so closely. There is no reaction on his face. He looks at him very intently. Liu Shang stretched out his legs and prepared to attack, which made the energy more intense. He looked at the ground and first concentrated the power of his 10 immortal cells into his legs, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. His expression changed and his gaze was filled with surprise. He was shocked to see our boy move while he was distracted. Still trying to figure out where Liu Shang was, Zhao Jai suddenly found our boy in front of him. Without hesitation, Liu Shang punched Zhao Jai in the face, concentrating the power of the immortal cells into his fist, which shot a powerful golden explosion at Zhao Jai body. Liu Shang's attack was so powerful that Zhao Jai couldn't do anything. The air rippled, and it completely shattered Zhao Jai martial avatar. His face starts to crack due to Liu Shang's punch, and he angrily says, "How can there be one? Look what you did." Our boy didn't respond, only staring the dude down, while Zhao Jai's body started to crumble. Shocked and furious, Zhao Jai realized that Liu Shang had completely destroyed his mortal vessel. Meanwhile, the Eastern Marshal was overcome with excitement, shouting Liu Shang's name and calling him the greatest hope of the military. By now, Zhao Jai's body finally collapsed completely, only to reveal a golden figure slowly emerging from within. "Looks like we are about to start stage 2. Liu Shang took a deep breath and said quietly, "Finally, the pedestal has been destroyed. Now it was time for the real fight." Rain poured down, splashing into the sea as Liu Shang calmly called out Zhao Jai's name, announcing that he would now begin the slaughter of the saint. The 5 marshals exchanged uneasy glances. They couldn't believe their ears. Did Liu Shang just say he was going to slay a saint? The officers on the deck were equally stunned, their expressions filled with awe and disbelief. They suddenly recalled what Liu Shang had said earlier. Clearly, this was all part of his plan, and he had always expected the martial saint to show up. He'd prepared for this battle long before it began, and now he was actually doing it. All eyes were on Liu Shang. To everyone watching, this was nothing short of legendary. In 300 years of martial arts history, there have been many legendary battles, some even favoring the underdog. But an 8th level defeating a 9th level. That had never happened. This was believed to be an impossible gap to cross. Yet Liu Shang seemed like he might just make the impossible happen. The marshals decided they should at least do something. One of them admitted they couldn't do much against the martial saint. One of them pointed out they still had their planes and warships, and they could still fire their artilleries. Even if it didn't work, they'd at least make a statement. Just like that, orders began rolling out, and the officers on deck sprang into action. The Eastern Marshal roared, saying the backbone of the military had been bent for far too long. It was time to finally stand tall. Artilleries and rockets extended from the front and sides of the warship. And at the marshal's command, a barrage of shells fired toward the martial saint. "To hell with the martial saint," they yelled. Meanwhile, Zhao Jai's true form hadn't fully appeared yet. Looking up, he was greeted by the sight of countless shells raining down on him. He casually raised a hand, and a protective barrier formed around him. All of the shells froze midair, suspended like they'd hit an invisible wall. With a simple wave of his hand, the dense barrage of shells reversed direction, flying back toward the warship. Flames erupted as the ships caught fire, and Zhao Jai, cold and emotionless, stared at Liu Sheng. He tells him that these people would all die because of him, because of his ignorant defiance. Look, RMC is so op, even his sleeves and clothes regenerate too. RMC, however, didn't even flinch. He looked at the rippling sea beneath his feet for a moment, before lifting his head to meet the martial saint's icy glare, calm but firm. He tells him that these were true warriors, soldiers with unbroken spines, who would never cower, even against an unbeatable opponent. With disdain, our boy sneered at Zhao Jai, pointing out that he was someone who didn't even dare to reveal his true form, even when coming for revenge, which explains why he doesn't know what's real courage. With that, Liu Sheng threw out a punch. To him, Zhao Jai was nothing more than a cowardly turtle hiding in its shell. He wasn't about to give Zhao Jai any room to breathe. Punch after punch flew toward him with relentless force, leaving him struggling to keep up. Enraged, Zhao Jai finally roared and began his counterattack. Their blows collided in a storm of blurred fists, too fast to count. Liu Sheng's movements grew faster, his senses sharper, and Zhao Jai quickly realized that he couldn't land a hit. In an instant, it became clear. Liu Sheng had mastered the deadly precision of killing intent perception and the fourth realm movement technique. Before Zhao Jai could react, Liu Sheng landed a solid punch across his face. Rubbing his cheek, he begrudgingly admitted that RMC had some skill, and he knew without using his true strength, it'd be impossible to kill Liu Sheng today. The next moment, Zhao Jai clasped his hands together and an immense energy surged from his body. The energy began to weave itself into the form of a towering figure, hundreds of meters tall. As the colossal martial avatar materialized over the ocean, Liu Sheng looked small and insignificant in comparison. Laughing maniacally, Zhao Jai began taunting, saying he wanted to see how the little bug would escape now. The marshals watched in shock as Zhao Jai unleashed his real martial avatar. This was the perfect fusion of his physical body and martial will. Perhaps this was the true might of a 9th-level martial saint. End of the day, no matter how skilled and powerful, no 8th level could produce such immense energy, let alone fight against it. Realizing this was Zhao Jai's final trump card. The marshals knew they had to protect Liu Sheng at all costs. Meanwhile, Zhao Jai, still sneering, called our boy a bug and declared his intent to crush him underfoot. But Liu Sheng, standing before the massive figure, found the whole spectacle hilarious. With a smirk, he remarked that all the flashy theatrics reminded him of an Ultraman knockoff. Memories of his relentless preparations flooded his mind, the countless times he had simulated the future in the dream realm. Come think of it, it was almost laughable now. Snapping back to reality, Liu Sheng's eyes sharpened as he entered the martial god state. But this time, he achieved perfect fusion. When Zhao Jai's towering figure launched a full-force attack, RMC's eyes turned crimson red and lightning-like energy crackled around him. Does anyone still remember where we saw this move before? Anyway, raising one hand, and with a single, swift motion, he sliced through Zhao Jai's massive martial avatar. Zhao Jai let out a cry of pain, stumbling back in disbelief. His face twisted with shock as he stared at Liu Sheng. What kind of power is this? He questioned. Liu Sheng, unbothered, gave him a mocking look. It's hard to explain to a country bumpkin martial saint. You're just too weak to understand.